Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking episode 21 of season 1 of Arrow, The Undertaking. Now, if you saw my last review, you know that I was not terribly happy at all with that episode. This brings it all back. This is what I want from Arrow, and this is what the show should be like. This is what the show is like when it is completely and utterly awesome, and I love it. It's great. Okay, so anyway, let's just get right into it. There's a lot of stuff going on here to talk about. And first of all, this is really kind of a nice Felicity episode. Not exactly a Felicity episode, but this is where Felicity as a character does another step in her evolution as a character. Here she's really going out, doing stuff in the field for Oliver for the first time. And really being the one that, now that Dig's gone, to call Oliver out on his BS. I mean, she even flat out states that Oliver has an almost pathological aversion to admitting when he is wrong. And you know what? That's a pretty fair statement of Oliver's character. I mean, he can't even bring himself to apologize to Dig. And it's not even in a situation where, yes, Oliver can make a reasonable case for what he did, but this isn't one of those times where you would apologize because you did something wrong, although admittedly that is debatable. You apologize here because you have upset someone you care about. You have upset someone who is your friend. And Oliver's basically telling Dig, I'm right, you're wrong. If that bothers you, get lost. Which, of course, is a remarkably stupid thing to do to a man who was aware of Oliver's secret identity. Not that I really think Dig would, rat him out to the cops or anything, but, still, Oliver, Dig's gone to bat for you quite a few times, and you would literally be dead if it wasn't for the guy. So, a little more consideration for the man's feelings, especially when it's in regards to the man who murdered his brother, would not go amiss. But anyway, like I said, I really do like how Felicity is, proving that she's really got what it takes to be on the team. Now, of course, there's the whole question of, Felicity has accomplished her goal. She has helped Oliver save Walter. So why exactly is she going to want to stick around? Well, I kind of like to think that Felicity is genuinely on board with what Oliver's been doing. Maybe not 100%, but I like to think that she's seen that Oliver does genuinely do good in the city. And, well, given the way things are going, it looks like Oliver is going to very much have the opportunity to really take that to a whole new level. And I also think that she might be willing to stick around simply because, I keep wanting to say Walter. Oliver and Dig, smart guys, talented guys, but two guys who sometimes really just need a smack in the head and someone to say to them, hey, you two need to stop being stupid. And Felicity's shown that she's not bad at that. She's very good at being the voice of reason, that cold bucket of water, that neutral party, to sort of put things in perspective. And I'm sure that the fact that the fans really seem to dig those scenes, no pun intended, between her and Oliver. I've noticed that even online, the character Steve Amell has spent more than a little time joking around how much the folks out there are really into the whole Oliver Felicity thing. And good for him for being willing to have a little fun with the fans. I like it when actors do that. I really actually do enjoy following Stephen Amell on Twitter. He's quite a cool guy. But anyway, let's move on. Now, we also, in terms of characters, we get a nice, serious look at Robert Queen. He was really not a terribly well sketched out character before this. We did get to see a little bit of who he was, especially when he killed that other man and committed suicide in order to help preserve Oliver's life. That was an extremely telling sort of idea of who Oliver's dad was. Here he's much, much more fleshed out. We see him as someone who is genuinely a good person. He really did. I mean, he apparently killed someone in an accident. that, from the sound of it, apparently never made the papers, but, whatever. And, decided to, atone for what he had done in what he thought was a reasonable way. And you know what? It's actually not that bad. Using his influence as a powerful businessman to force the corrupt individuals in the city to do good acts or do things that better the city. In a way, they are, in a way, like sort of like a prototype for what Oliver would become. Only Oliver is, of course, much more with the violence and the killing. I mean, that is really what's going on here. I mean, actually, let me come back to Robert in a minute. Let me talk about what the really big thing that's going on here is. And that is that in many ways, that Malcolm is that really dark reflection of Oliver. I mean, his character his evil persona is called the Dark Archer, as if that wasn't really clear enough. But here we do really see that. He's Walter. Gosh, why do I keep wanting to call everybody Walter? Okay, Malcolm has, suffered that incredible loss. Malcolm is the guy that's in terrible pain. Malcolm is the guy who wants to do good by his city. And he does, at first, try to do things in a way that, it would be morally acceptable. Kind of putting the screws to bad people and making them use their wealth and influence to better the city. But for him, it is simply not enough. And he's really explicit with this. He points out how all the other folks on in the Undertaking, before it goes really evil, have suffered, had lost something because of the Glades. And he sees this ultimately as, we haven't gone far enough. We have to be more ruthless. We have to be willing to make these sacrifices. We have to be willing to have that hard, dark edge. And look at this. That Malcolm before this was probably, kind of a crummy dad, but apart from that, probably a decent guy. But here we see, like, look what happened with Oliver. When he starts off on that island, he can't even bring himself to kill a bird. And then look at what Oliver becomes when we see him in that first episode. Willing to just absolutely execute a man simply to protect his secret identity. Willing to kill many, many people, including people who may have just been security guards doing their job. So, we do see that. It does continue that. It is the case of what loss will do to people and how violence will just perpetuate violence. I mean, what's that famous saying? Violence does not end violence, it only extends it. Now, granted, Malcolm is, of course, basically trying to get revenge on the Glades for the death of his wife, and Oliver is trying to atone for the sins of his father. Two very contradictory situations. But again, what these two men turn themselves into in order to accomplish their goals, that's the real key. And of course, Malcolm is also, sort of in a way a dark counterpart to Robert. Robert, killed someone by mistake and he wanted to atone for it. Malcolm, lost someone in a terrible tragedy, and at first he does try and do the right thing. But it's just not enough. Malcolm is ultimately consumed by his desire for revenge and becomes the Dark Archer, becomes someone who's willing to do horrible things, even to people that he cares about. I mean, look, let me tell you one thing. And for me, this is the episode that, surprisingly enough, really crystallizes Malcolm to me as a character. And it's that conversation that he has with Moira where he offers that little glass of champagne, and they're talking. He's like, he says to her, to Robert, I'm sorry I had to take him from you. Now stop and think about this for a minute. Malcolm is basically saying, like, yeah, I had your husband murdered, and, at the time I thought that it looked like I killed your son as collateral damage, and, then I actually did send somebody to kill your son, and then I had your husband kidnapped, and, I've threatened your family. But you know what? I'm glad we're still buds. Folks, that right there makes it so subtle. It's subtle, but if you stop and think about it, it makes it perfectly clear that good old Malcolm Merlyn is completely and utterly out of his gourd. This is just a perfect example of just how twisted this man's view of the world has become. That he still thinks, after all of this stuff that he has done, that Moira is still his friend. That he can do this to someone and still have their friendship. I mean, damn, this guy is completely bonkers. And what's really great is that John Barrowman just plays this guy like a guy who just went into Starbucks and ordered a frappuccino. And man, this is just great stuff. This is how you really do a good villain. Malcolm does have these tragic elements to him, these elements where you do feel for him. You feel bad for this guy. You understand why he does what he does. But then you also have all these stuff that he's done that are just horrible and evil. He's treated his son horribly. He's done all this stuff to the Queen family. He's betrayed his friend Robert and had him murdered, all just because he wants revenge on some real estate. Now, okay, granted, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but really, that's what it is. He's pissed off at the bad part of town, so this is what he's going to go and do. But anyway, let's go back to talking about Robert. As I said, this is an episode where we really do get to see him really oscillating. He's trying to do the right thing. He finds himself caught up in this undertaking. And ultimately he realizes, no, this has gone too far. Now, honestly, Robert never really seemed to be very on board with this from the beginning. You have to kind of wonder if maybe he didn't just go along with this for so long, and thinking that, man, okay, I'll play along for now, but eventually I'm sure I'll be able to talk Malcolm out of this. I'll get him to come to his senses and forget all this. And then it kind of probably got to some sort of a point where he's like, no, this isn't going to work. And that's probably at the point where he approached Frank Chen. And we did see how well that worked out when Frank betrayed him. Which, of course, puts an entirely different and supremely ironic spin on things when you think about how Moira betrayed Frank and got him killed. Gee, if you stop and think about that, maybe Malcolm should have been a little bit more suspicious of what happened there. Then again, if Frank had betrayed, Robert, then why would he think that Frank would be above betraying him? So, yeah. And of course, this episode really, in so many ways, does a lot to enhance Moira as a character. We've seen Moira so far as this very manipulative person, somebody who can be extremely ruthless at times. And then we go back, dial things back 5 years, and we see Moira as she was back then, and she's just an ordinary woman. It is this tragedy, this circle of blood, cycle of violence that she gets caught up in because of her husband, but mostly because of Malcolm, that ultimately transforms her into this person that she becomes. This person that hired people to kidnap and torture her own son. I mean, damn. I mean, it's a perfect example of what anger and hatred and violence will do to people. What it will do to good people. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. Okay, that's not all of the quote, but you know where that's going from if you've seen Star Wars. But anyway, let's see, what else do we have to talk about? Let's kind of finish up some of the character stuff. Not a whole lot to say about what's going on with Tommy this week. Honestly, I'm still really not feeling this whole Oliver is still in love with Laurel thing. One, it really bothers me because it just seems to seriously cheapen Oliver's relationship with McKenna. Now, granted, McKenna wasn't the best sketched out character on the show, but they did a reasonable job with her. And his relationship with Huntress, well, you can kind of write that off as basically Oliver finding someone who he thought was like himself and just running with that baton a little too fast, and not really paying attention to where he was going. And we all saw how that happened. But yeah, honestly, I just think that this is more interesting with them, Oliver, just at least to some reasonable degree, honestly past his relationship with Laurel. I mean, I granted that his, desire to return and be with her and make things right with her is is the main thing that keeps him one of the big things that keeps him going on the island. In this flashback, we see Oliver being an enormous dickweed. Just totally selfish, not able to be honest with Laurel about his feelings at all. And of course, there's the whole stuff with his sister, and Oliver randomly being a jerk to some poor pizza delivery guy. As somebody who was briefly employed in that profession some years ago, yeah, screw you, man. You expect me to be able to break 100? Dream on. Man, I hated that job. Anyway, so not a whole lot to say, but I do like how this episode does go a long way towards setting us up with a very clear picture of just who Oliver was before he and his dad set out on that fateful voyage. Choose this moment to hum the Gilligan's Island theme if you wish. So anyway, Laurel, not a whole lot to say about what's going on with her. Flashback Laurel, very much oblivious to Oliver's obvious cold feet at the idea of moving in together. I did think that she did sell, however, her anguish over Tommy, not really shutting her out. And honestly, I can't really say that part where Oliver said, but that wouldn't be true. Of course, she does make a really nice point of, why Oliver and Tommy don't really just sit down and have a real discussion. I mean, I've complained about this before, that, really, why has Tommy not said, Oliver, could you maybe tell me something about what happened to you on that island so I understand why you're running around the city with a bow and arrow killing people? I mean, for God's sake, Oliver, if Tommy knows, at least go and clue him into the level that you have Dig and Felicity. That way, he's, your best friend is not quite so emotionally messed up in regards to you. That is the sort of thing that you, as his best friend, probably should do, and there's no logical reason for you not to do this. But anyway. Okay. Not a whole lot to say about what's going on with Dig this time around. As I've said, I don't think he's 100% in the right. Oliver isn't required to be on board with his personal vendetta. But again, Oliver did really really did basically promise him that he'd help take down Deadshot, and then didn't, and then sort of told Dig to go screw himself. So, yeah, I'm mostly on Dig's side here. Also, is it just me, or does Dig seem to have a pretty crummy apartment for somebody who, until recently, was employed as the bodyguard to a billionaire? I mean, you'd think he'd have a somewhat nicer place. I mean, is his apartment supposed to be in the Glades? I mean, Felicity does mention that she walked up 6 flights of stairs, so if there's an elevator in his building, and I assume there would be, it's not working. And of course, there's a question of why would Dig choose to live in the Glades? I mean, it is established that's the part of town where he's from, and amazingly enough, that's where the Big Belly Burger is. But seriously, dude, why don't you move to a nicer part of town? I mean, I get that you grew up there and all, and it's probably close to where your sister-in-law and nephew live, but dude, take the subway or something. I don't know, man. I had to live in a sketchy neighborhood for the better part of 2 years, and there's not a whole lot that would have stopped me from moving the heck out of there the first chance I got, which I did, incidentally. So, yeah. Now, let's talk about some of the really nice stuff. We get some awesome nods to the DC universe. It's specifically mentioned in the flashback that Robert and Moira had been at a fundraiser held by Ted Kord. Of course, Ted Kord in the comics is the Kiro Blue Beetle. Somebody on the line said that they'd heard the names Ray and Jean mentioned. Now, I think I caught that, but it might have gone just by too fast for me. Of course, this is almost certainly a reference to the characters of Ray Palmer and Jean Loring. Ray Palmer is, of course, the superhero the Atom, and Jean Loring is his wife. There's also quite a bit more going on with Jean Loring if you're familiar with the comics, but I don't want to spoil some stuff. So yeah. But the real gold here is Malcolm mentions that whatever it is he's planning is tied up in something called the Markov device. And this is, of course, a nod to the characters of, I think it's Brian and Tara Markov, who are the superheroes Geoforce and Tara, respectively. And of course, as I've mentioned, these two, the references to the Markovs and Markovia and all that have popped up in the show before. These two heroes both have the power of geokinesis, the ability to move and control Earth. So even though I don't normally speculate on these reviews, this kind of makes me think that we're looking at maybe some type of gadget that causes earthquakes. And, well, if you stop and think about it, the Glades is in the bad part of town. The buildings are pretty crappy. I mean, we've even been established in the Slumlord episode with the Savior that a lot of those buildings there are in just absolutely awful shape. And it's never really made that clear, but Starling City is supposed to be set somewhere in California. So, if there were to, say, be an earthquake that hits Starling City, certainly not inconceivable in California, then it certainly is believable that a large part of town that was built full of crappy buildings could collapse. Now, I don't know about 24 square blocks, but, this is at the end of the day a comic book show, so, I'm willing to let that slide. And let's not pretend that these sort of disasters can't happen. I mean, these sort of things have indeed happened in places like Burma. Now, like Burma and Brazil and Malaysia. Now, granted, those are countries where the housing is below even really crappy neighborhoods in American standards. People living in basically what are shacks built from stuff that they found laying around in garbage heaps. That's a big part of the reasons why they do have such terrible casualties when natural disasters strike those areas. But again, this is all plausible within, plausible by superhero standards. So let's just sort of roll with it. Let me see here. What else? Yes, of course. We can't talk about nods to the DC Universe without noting the fact that Oliver went and saved Walter while he was being held in Bloodhaven. Now, Bloodhaven has been mentioned on the show. That was even where Deadshot was living when China White brought in that little gizmo. So that was pretty cool. And, of course, the scene of Oliver rescuing Walter and just beating down single-handedly an army of thugs. Awesome, awesome, awesome. I love that. That was so cool. And, oh yeah, of course, we do get to see the Queen family united. Walter's back. That's great. I think Walter is a fantastic character. And the reunion with his family at this hospital, particularly that moment where he calls Oliver son. Man, that's some good stuff right there. And just sort of the look on Oliver's face about how he realizes that he's really missed this influence in his life. That was really nice. That was very good acting moment there on Steve Amell's part. And you know what? Honestly, I'd really like to see more of the Queen family together in the next season, which of course has been confirmed. Really, what kind of influences are Walter and Moira, assuming they're still alive next season, really going to have on Oliver? He does have a family again, and what is that going to do in terms of his growth as a character? Again, that's something I'd really like to see more of. So, yeah, I think that really covers everything that I have to say about this episode. Again, extremely disappointed by last week's episode, but this one really brings it all back. So many pieces come together. There's just so much good acting going on the part of Steve Amell and John Barrowman and everybody, and it looks like this is just going to be a mind-blowingly awesome season finale. I believe we have 2 more episodes left, so yeah, this is why I love this show. Anyway, folks, that's all I got for you this time. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe, and of course you can follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. Until next time, take care and have a good one.